A small town in Scotland recorded something shocking on January 13th. The thermometer hit -24.6 degrees Celsius in Carnwath. This was the third coldest reading ever seen in the United Kingdom. People stepped outside and felt their breath turn to ice instantly. Going outdoors felt like walking into a freezer. This single moment captured what Britain was going through during those months. The trouble actually began much earlier, during autumn. September and October of 1978 were unusually warm. Nobody expected what was coming. Workers all over the country were angry because the government wanted them to accept just 5% more pay. Meanwhile, prices kept going up and eating into whatever money they made. Factory workers at Ford decided they had experienced enough. They stopped working in September and managed to get 17% more wages. When other workers heard about this success, they started thinking about doing the same thing. Christmas came and went. Then December 30th arrived and everything fell apart. The rain changed into snow. Freezing air came all the way from Siberia and settled over Britain like a heavy blanket. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, the airport at Heathrow only got as warm as -3 degrees. Snow covered everything. The country was already dealing with workers refusing to work, and now the weather was making things even harder. The southwest part of England got hit the worst. In Devon, snow piled up to 6 feet in some places. Other locations saw snowbanks reaching 8 meters tall. Small villages like Ilfracombe became completely cut off. The only way to reach them was by helicopter. The road called A20 that runs between Dover and Folkestone got completely blocked. Nobody could get through. Over on the Isle of Sheppey, 9 cars got stuck one after another, buried up to their bonnets in snow. Drivers just abandoned them and walked away. Here's what made everything worse. Britain should have been able to handle snow. That's what gritting trucks are for. They should have been out all night keeping the roads clear. By morning, people should have been able to drive normally. But that didn't happen. The workers who operated those gritting trucks had stopped working too. They were on strike. Local councils said they didn't have enough staff and couldn't agree with the unions. So the snow just stayed where it fell, and Britain stayed stuck. By the middle of January, the situation had moved past being just annoying. It was actually becoming deadly. Temperatures kept dropping. The cold was the kind that hurts when you breathe. Thousands of homes had their water pipes break open. The water inside the main pipes froze completely solid. Families woke up one day and had no water coming from their taps. Their heating stopped working. They saw ice forming on the inside of their windows. This wasn't the pretty kind of frost you see in pictures. It was thick ice that you needed to scrape off just to see outside. People who had central heating systems found they barely worked. Most homes back then still heated themselves by burning coal in fireplaces. But coal deliveries had stopped because of the strikes. Workers weren't striking because they were greedy. They were striking because they needed to survive. One man who dug graves in Liverpool talked about his work. He had to crawl into muddy holes that kept collapsing around him. He got covered in slime every single day. His life was at risk constantly. And what did he get paid? Barely enough money to pay his rent. On January 22nd, 56 gravediggers in Liverpool and Tameside walked off their jobs. None of them had ever gone on strike before in their lives. But they had reached their breaking point. The timing couldn't have been worse. People kept dying like they always do. But now there was nobody to bury them. Funeral homes filled up first. Then the mortuaries at hospitals got full. After that, the undertakers ran out of room completely. The Liverpool City Council had to come up with a solution. They rented an empty factory building in Speke that used to make electronics. They started storing bodies there. At the peak, there were 150 dead bodies waiting in that warehouse. Each one was sealed inside thick plastic bags with special crystals to preserve them. 25 more bodies showed up every single day. Families couldn't hold proper funerals. They had to move memorial services away from the cemetery chapels to churches in other areas. This was done to avoid fights between people mourning their loved ones and the workers on strike. Families drove past the cemetery where their relatives should have been buried. They knew those bodies were sitting in a warehouse somewhere instead. People felt their hearts breaking. They felt humiliated. The newspapers went crazy with the story. Big headlines talked about bodies stacking up everywhere. Someone from Liverpool's health department mentioned that if the strike went on for months, they might need to consider burial at sea. He was just talking about a worst-case scenario. But when the public heard this, they panicked. Politicians said this was an insult to basic human decency. A priest said it was destroying the foundation of society. Maybe he was correct, because when you can't even bury people who have died, what does that say about your country? After 2 weeks, the Gravediggers agreed to settle. They got 14% more pay. The bodies finally got buried properly. But the harm to how people saw Britain had already happened. This wasn't just workers refusing to work. It had become a symbol showing that the entire country was breaking down. More strikes kept happening. On January 22nd, the workers who collected rubbish stopped working. Trash piled up on every single street. Westminster City Council was run by Conservative politicians. They decided to make a statement by dumping garbage right in Leicester Square. This was in the middle of London's West End. Black garbage bags formed mountains. They rotted in the cold weather. Rats started multiplying everywhere. The smell became impossible to bear. And during all of this, the snow never stopped falling. Drivers of ambulances started refusing to respond to emergency calls in certain areas. The military had to come in and help. Hospitals cut back everything except emergency services. Workers in the National Health Service were some of the lowest paid people in Britain. They stood outside with signs and banners protesting. One hospital even refused to give the health minister his morning tea and newspaper when he came in for medical treatment. These were small acts of rebellion, but they kept adding up. Truck drivers were on strike too. This meant fuel couldn't get delivered anywhere. Grocery store shelves became empty. Fresh food went bad before it could reach the shops. Even when it did arrive, there was nobody to unload it from the trucks. Farmers in Hull couldn't get food for their animals. They took dead piglets and chickens and dumped them outside the union offices to make their point. The union claimed the farmers had killed those animals on purpose. The farmers said the animals died because the strike left them with no options. Everyone was blaming everyone else. James Callaghan was the Prime Minister at the time. He made the biggest mistake of his entire career during this period. He had traveled to the Caribbean to attend a summit meeting. He was enjoying warm sunshine while his country was freezing. He came back on January 10th and spoke to reporters. He told them they were making things sound worse than they really were. The Sun newspaper printed a headline that said, "Crisis? What crisis?" even though those exact words never came out of his mouth. But the damage was done anyway. Everyone thought he didn't care and didn't understand what people were going through. In politics, what people think matters more than the truth. By the middle of January, Britain had stopped trying to work normally. Schools shut their doors. Businesses closed down. Roads that should have been busy with traffic sat empty and covered in snow that nobody would clear away. The few brave people who went outside wrapped themselves in every piece of clothing they owned. They still came home shaking from the cold. But even during all this hardship, people showed kindness to each other. Neighbors checked on one another. Complete strangers helped dig cars out of the snow. Someone always made tea, even if they had to melt snow to get water. In the pubs that managed to stay open, people crowded around the fireplace. They shared stories and laughed together, pushing back against the freezing cold outside. It wasn't comfortable, but it was community. During that terrible winter, this mattered more than anything else. February arrived and brought new blizzards. The 14th through the 16th saw some of the absolute worst weather of the whole winter. Heavy snow came down. Strong winds blew from the east. Temperatures hit -3 degrees while winds reached 50 miles per hour. Roads cracked open. Potholes appeared overnight. The south coast got cut off when a storm surge pushed cars from a parking lot right into the ocean. Massive waves crashed against the coastline. And still, the strikes kept going. Finally, on February 14th, the government and union leaders managed to reach an agreement. The strike started to slow down and stop. But by that point, almost 30 million days of work had been lost across Britain. The economy was badly damaged, and people had lost all patience. When the snow finally started melting in the middle of February, it felt like the country could breathe again. Water dripped down from rooftops. Roads appeared again. The first milk delivery arrived without being frozen solid, and people actually clapped and cheered. Life slowly and carefully went back to something that looked normal. But nothing felt the same as before. The trust between workers, government, and citizens had been broken. That May, Britain held elections. Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party won by a huge margin. The Labour Party got blamed for losing control of everything, and they lost power. Callaghan's government collapsed. The laws that Thatcher put in place after she won changed trade unions forever. The rules about strikes became much more strict. Workers had to hold ballots before they could strike. The balance of power shifted completely. Whether this was good or bad depends on who you ask, but the winter of discontent definitely ended one era and started another. Ask anyone who was alive during that winter and they'll tell you the same thing. What they remember isn't just the cold. They remember the feeling that everything was collapsing around them. The garbage everywhere, the dead people who couldn't be buried, the frozen streets. But they also remember the neighbors who knocked on doors to check if everyone was okay. They remember the strangers who helped each other. They remember the quiet strength that told everyone, we'll get through this. And in the end, Britain did get through it. The snow melted away. The strikes ended. Life continued forward. The winter became a memory, but one that changed the country forever. The events of those months affected British politics for decades afterward. The image of rubbish piling up in Leicester Square and bodies in warehouses became symbols of government failure. These images helped bring in a new political era with very different ideas about how workers and businesses should operate. The temperature reading in Carnwath on January 13th remains one of the coldest ever recorded in Britain. The winter of 1978-79 combined the worst of nature with the worst of political conflict. Weather alone would have been manageable. Strikes alone would have been difficult. But both happening at exactly the same time created a perfect storm that brought one of the world's major countries to a standstill. The lessons from that winter are still discussed today. How much power should workers have? What happens when public services stop? How should governments respond when essential workers strike? These questions don't have easy answers. What everyone can agree on is that those few months showed both the worst and best of human nature. The conflict and breakdown sat alongside kindness and community. Britain survived the winter of 1978-79, but it was never quite the same afterward. The physical cold eventually went away. The political Cold War between different groups took much longer to thaw.